Hey everybody, thanks for being here again. Now I know I had a short video the other day talking a bit about the Nephilim, and now today this is going to be more of a direct follow along to my first video, moving into or through Genesis. And today it's going to be called I'm going to call this the focus on of an infidel, and it's going to be Genesis chapters 4 and 5. Now, infidel might seem like a weird term, but we'll get into that. We'll discuss what that means and how that's going to tie into Adam and Eve and their lineage. So, quick recap again, the last lesson this ended with God's judgment for disobedience. And now we have ourselves continuing to move through Genesis, and we're going to be receiving a detailed account for the lineage that's to follow Adam and Eve. This is their children. And I came across a writing from the 1800s by Dr. David Nelson. And he said a few things that I feel like resonated with this, and that's kind of what we'll get into. So, with that being said, I'd first like to discuss infidelity, exactly what that word means, the definition, and how it's used. An infidel specifically, this is a person who has no religion or whose religion is not that of the majority. And infidelity, this would be the action or state of being unfaithful. Here we could say that eating from the tree of knowledge, this very well was the first act of infidelity. A lot of times, people hear this word infidelity, and they specifically think uh, marriage. They think cheating spouses, things like that. But back to the actual word infidelity, it has a secondary definition, and according to the Oxford Dictionary, that is a disbelief in a particular religion, especially Christianity. I find it interesting here that the dictionary specifically points out that this is a disbelief in Christianity. Um, Now, we contrast fidelity. It defines fidelity as being faithfulness to a person, cause, or belief, and this is demonstrated by continuing loyalty and support. So now consider Genesis and consider the disobedience of Adam and Eve, and God still provided for them, providing for Adam and Eve. They still had food. He even says that he clothed them. So before they just had the loincloths made of leaves, and it says he made skins for them. So he was still providing them. He still supported them. He still wanted to be with them. And then we look at how this Cain and Abel in chapter 4, and um, even after the murder of Abel, God protects Cain. All of this is to say, even through God, even through his unhappiness, God is still loyal and supportive. And Second Chronicles verse 7:14, it states, "If my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land." Um, so interesting here is that through Adam and Eve, because of their disobedience, the ground was cursed. And here in Second Chronicles, it specifically uses that word to heal the land. So that's interesting. Just think there was two of them. There was Adam and Eve. I think this should serve as a reminder to us if we feel the call or if we feel pulled to do something, we should act with haste and shouldn't hesitate. Because, as I said, in this scenario, it was just the two of them. If they would have acted, they may have possibly restored that original covenant. But instead, the genealogy continues. And as the population grew, it becomes harder for the humanity as a whole in order to turn back and repent from that. And if you notice here in Genesis chapter 5, verse 3, it is when it's speaking of Adam and his children, it's saying that he fathered them in his likeness according to his image. Um, that is to say, Adam's image being one of sin. This is a similar verbiage to what was used when God created Adam, but there was the change after the apple, and that is to say that everyone from Adam beyond was created in Adam's image with that sinful nature. And it wasn't until Genesis chapter 4, verses 26 with Enosh, where it says that mankind began to want to be like God, walk in the ways of God and the Lord and those things. Now, if you read Psalms chapter 51, verses 5, uh, David reaffirms this principle. He says, "Indeed, I was guilty when I was born. I was sinful when my mother conceived me." And simply put, the redemptive qualities of salvation, these are not something that is passed from one generation to the next. And salvation is instead, this is an individual decision. And this would be one of my personal reasons against the infant baptism. Um, God's grace alone is enough for the infant child, but it's not going to provide that salvation um, at a certain point. Age of accountability, a lot of people call that. Now, consider chapter 4, and back to when I was discussing a bit about the fidelity of God. And if you look at chapter 4 in Genesis, when Cain kills Abel, he's an infidel. This is an act of infidelity. He's showing no loyalty to his brother. He kills him out of jealousy, out of rage, uh, that he was having a better sacrifice for God. And just as his parents before, uh, Cain tries to hide the act of murder. And it also appears here that Cain was more fearful of mankind than of God. Um, which maybe speaks into that trust element, or something along those lines. And now God could have just killed Cain right there on the spot. He was frustrated. And says, "What did you do? I can't believe this happened." And imagine you come in. If you have pets, one of your pets kills the other one. You have kids, one of your kids kills the other one. So like you get pissed off. And in this case, God just says, "You know what? You're banished." And all Cain says is somebody's going to kill me. And so God actually puts a mark of protection on Cain. And I feel that this speaks to that fidelity and the faith that God has in the human condition, and that He will reveal Himself to us, and we will acknowledge that and try to turn from our human ways, or the image of Adam. And what now? Whether Cain ever actually repented, it's not revealed. However, it does go into detail about the descendants of Cain, and it goes in the last one, I believe, being Lamech, and this man, and he shows a disdain for God. This is in chapters 4, verses 23 and 24, and the tone when he's speaking to his wives. Here you have the first documented case of polygamy. Um, just that's a in this case you could in this case, one could consider that a boastful act, trying to show superiority. He's better than everybody else. Look, I got two wives, that kind of thing. He's bragging that he would kill somebody. He won't even blink an eye. He don't care if he gets cursed worse than Cain. So if Cain had repented, and if Cain uh, was trying to follow in God's footsteps and do those things, we would expect that he would raise his children that way, and we wouldn't see this case with Lamech. And that's where I go back to the verse about Seth and Enosh, and it says it wasn't until this time that men begin to call on God and look towards Him. Now, at this, I would like to shift back to Dr. Nelson and what he wrote. In this, he is discussing the rise of deism in America. It's 1837, and he's he's talking about the rise of deism, and he states, "We are fearful that both popery and infidelity have been promoted in our country by these well-intended efforts." So, what he's saying here is the deists, their intentions were good, but just because you have good intention doesn't mean that it's correct. And infidelity simply being the state of unfaithfulness, and in this case, an unfaithfulness to God, and an unfaithfulness to what it is that He would like to see in our lives. Now, he goes on. He thanks God by saying, "While the number of infidels in our country are so numerous, they have at the same time attained so little respectability." So what he's saying is that yeah, there's our country, we're full of these infidels, these non-believers, and but no one's giving them paying them a lot of attention. Um, they're, they're not being respected by the culture. Now it says, neither in the brilliant genius and imposing career of Thomas Jefferson, nor the more unassuming administration of President Monroe, in all of whose state papers we do not remember of meeting a solitary allusion to the existence of the Christian religion, have in any degree imparted respectability to the character of an avowed infidel. So what a lot of old words, a lot of it's a long kind of run on with a lot of apostrophes and stuff. But what he's saying here is, and this is you got to know the context of the times and things. So Thomas Jefferson, he's accredited as being a deist. Um, Monroe, he there's not a lot of he didn't write a lot of things. If they did, they're not around. But it's assumed that Monroe is a deist, and neither one of them specifically came out and uh, gave any respectability to these infidels, to these non-believers, to these deists. Um, you know, nothing in as the president of the United States, nothing in President Monroe, nothing in his speeches, nothing in his doctrine, nothing in his writings, his any of those things, nothing in there acknowledged God. Nothing out there glorified God, gave God credit. Nothing along those lines. Again, we're unsure if Monroe was an infidel, or in this case, modern terms, a non-believer. But he was friends with a lot of them. Thomas Paine, he was a profound deist, credited with that, and they were best friends. He bailed him out of prison. The guy moved to his house. He lived there forever, ate their food, and they were well known to be friends at this time. Now, uh, Monroe, he even appointed chaplains. And these chaplains, they weren't ordained. They had no religious backing. But he gave them the position of chaplain. So there was a lot of things here that spoke to his character. And Dr. Nelson, he goes on to say, um, there's an involuntary shrinking back from such men, and that these sentiments are avowed. Um, and what he's saying here is that just because they never came out and publicly stated, hey, I support these people, hey, I support this movement, hey, I do these things, the fact that they, cohabited, the actions they took, this avowed, this brought to light, this revealed, this was a public declaration of their opinions, of their beliefs, of their stance, of their support towards these individuals. Um, so to avow something is to publicly acknowledge, to publicly decree. When you get baptized, that's a public confession of your faith. When you get married, that's a public declaration of your love to your spouse. In this case, Thomas Paine, for example, he wrote books, things like that. He avowed that, yes, I am a deist. This is what I believe. Uh, President Monroe never did this, but his actions, they avowed, even though he never publicly said this, his actions avowed for him. His actions revealed his true character and his true intent. And it showed his support for these deists, for these non believers. Nelson goes on to state, without vigorous effort to enlighten and Christianize the rising generation, this cannot be said. Uh, Referring to what cannot be said is he's referring to the respectability of the infidel, of the non believer, of the deist in this case. Essentially saying you need to speak, you need to enlighten the next generation. It's our job. Just go out and talk about this, be public, share the knowledge, share your faith. Not only is that what the Bible instructs us to do as believers, is to share our faith and why it is we believe what we believe, but it talks about there will be a time where what is right will be wrong and what's wrong will be right. And here Nelson's talking about credibility, and when you consider right and wrong, the truth is credible. And so as soon as we allow the the truth to become seen as not credible, and we can no longer share that knowledge and share the gift that Christ has given us. And lastly, he states, pride of ambition and the strife of party are fast driving from our offices. They are fast becoming despoiled of their dignity and deserted of their morality and religion. So what he's saying there when he's talking about the politicians and the pride of ambition and the strife of party, that's the inner party conflict, and the pride is getting in the way of their dignity, their religion. It's pushing all those things at the bottom of the barrel, and their own personal desires or personal ambition wants those are becoming the priority. So if this was something that was becoming an issue back in the early 1800s, you know, we think what we're seeing today in politics is bad. It's can only imagine what someone like him would have thought seeing the current state of politics in today, I believe. And lastly, I would have us look at Philippians chapter 3, verse 19. When writing this, this was Paul, and he was warning the church about the enemies of the cross. And here he states, uh, their end is destruction, their God is their stomach, their glory is in their shame, they are focused on earthly things. So to wrap all this up, I think Paul did a good job there. You had Adam and Eve, and you had all the descendants. I believe we go to chapter 6 in Genesis. It talks about everybody's mind was on sin and immoral thoughts. And it wasn't until everybody was having kids, and it wasn't until the line of Seth and Enosh before they started looking towards God. Nelson was talking about the deists and how they were trying to justify what they were doing, and the danger that was for the church, and how unaligned that was with the biblical teaching. And then again, we had Paul here saying the same thing. So uh, now in today's world, we should ask ourselves, who are we following, and what's their end goal? Who's their where do they find their glory? And whether that's a teacher, a social media influencer, someone from your church, people on TV, whoever that is that you look at, uh, take a step back, think about it, and ask those questions. So, with that in mind, ask yourself, what lies at your end? Who's your God? Where do you find glory? And where is your focus? Made in the image of Adam, the image of sin, but we have that freedom. Um, we have that freedom of choice to live in God's image. That freedom and responsibility, again, it is one of our own, and that's a personal choice that we have to make. And just with what Nelson had previously said regarding Monroe, and uh, how no one understood what his true feelings were. Your actions, the people you follow, the things that you do, the actions you take in your life. You can be an infidel, you can have fidelity, or you can have infidelity, whichever way you want to have it. Um, they're going to speak, and they're going to give credibility, whether that credibility is to God, or whether that credibility is to another being, another power, and that's what they were all speaking of. So those people are going to know where your true stance is. And just as with the apple and the killing of Abel, you can't hide that from God at the end anyway. So um, you might as well answer those questions now. Hey, and with all that being said, thanks again for spending some time with me, hearing what I had to say. And again, hit that thumbs up, like, subscribe, comment, share, do whatever you can to help out the channel. And until next time, get in the Word.